Is it possible to put 10 poison counters onto our opponent's face to win the game without utilizing any rares or mythics in this Brawl deck? Because that is the focus of today's video. Hello my fiery friends, the Infernoman here with the hottest in budget deck technology. And for today's deck tech, join me once again as we continue to make our way through the Basically series. For those that don't know, this is a series of deck techs that I put together that will not require you to use a single rare or mythic to build.
Neat!
That's right. So without further ado, let us continue our way into the ultra budget Brawl decks that we have begun to put together, and today's deck is going to be called, Basically, Fynn. Longtime viewers of the channel know how we do it. We have to talk about the stats of the deck before we dive right in. So basically, Fynn is going to be a mono green budget build that is going to have an average mana curve of about 1.5. We're looking at a total of 25 creatures in the deck. We will also be rocking 11 instants, 12 sorceries, 8 artifacts, 13 enchantments, and 34 lands. This honestly was part of a request by a handful of you out there that wanted to see if we could put together an ultra budget version of Fynn the Fangbearer in Arena, and I'm more than happy of course to oblige, because honestly he's actually fairly straightforward to build for, and also he's one of the most popular budget commanders you can play in mono green, so it seemed like it was pretty natural we were going to gravitate towards him. For those of you that may be scratching your heads and are unsure about what this card can do, Fynn the Fangbearer allows us to start putting poison counters on our opponent. The magic number we want to hit is 10. If we can hit 10 poison counters on our opponent, no matter what their game plan is, no matter how much life they have, it will be all over for them, and that is the goal of today's deck. But you may be asking yourself right now, how can we even pull off this game plan on a budget that doesn't have any rares or mythics in the deck?
Well, you got me.
To understand the deck better, we'll break it down into simple categories to help you figure out how this all works. So first category is going to be everything that involves the game plan itself. So in other words, Fynn here with poison counters, toxic mechanic, and the death touch mechanic. As you can see here for the entire first category here, all of these 1-drops and a couple of 2-drops here all have death touch in any way, shape, or form, just to make sure that once Fynn hits the battlefield, we can then start doing a bunch of damage and then getting a bunch of poison counters on our opponents. So cards like Ankle Biter here, Dragon Sniper here, who also has Reach and Vigilance, Fang Shigeki, Gnarled Wood Dryad here, can get a little bit of extra pump once we trigger Delirium off. Grand Pulse Ochu here, Death Touch, but also for 8 mana, they can get some extra pump with every permanent card we have in our graveyard here for a great finisher. Moss Viper, Natharn Renegade here, the card can get a little extra pump if we trigger the Revolt ability here. Sedge Scorpion, Nightshade Dryad here can also be a mana dork for us, but also a great attacker at a pinch. Toxic Scorpion, which also can give another creature we control Death Touch until end of turn. And finally, Underdark Basilisk. For additional support, we'll utilize, of course, the Toxic mechanic as to the best of our ability, and also cards that just give us straight out poison counters on our opponent will be cards like Prosthetic Injector here, gives us an extra +0/+2, and also Toxic 1 to a creature as an equipment. Branch Blight Stalker here has Toxic 2. Infectious Bite can get a poison counter on our opponent, and also we can deal damage equal to our power to our target creature we don't control. Excellent for then spot removing anything utilizing one of our Death Touch creatures. Venom Connoisseur here, whenever another creature we control enters, this creature will gain Death Touch until end of turn. If this is the second time this ability does trigger, gives all of our creatures Death Touch, so it can be a great finisher for our deck. Dune Mover here, when it enters, we can then pull out a basic land, put it on top of our library, and then on top of that, it also has Toxic 1. Mirror Convert here may have us pay 2 life, but also has Toxic 1, so it is good for our game plan. Deathbloom Gardener here, it's an expensive mana dork, but also has Death Touch, so it is good for our deck. Ichorspit Basilisk here does the best of both, so it has Death Touch and Toxic 1. Maze's Mantle here can be a good way of providing protection if our creature has Toxic to give it hexproof, but also gives an enchanted creature +2/+2. Viral Spawning here is excellent for our deck. It creates a Phyrexian Beast with Toxic 1. However, if we trigger Corrupted, that means this card also has Flashback to then play it again from the graveyard. Plague Nurse here also has Toxic 2, and each other creature we control with Toxic 1 can also gain another level of Toxic until end of turn with its ability. Venomous Brutalizer here, when this creature enters, we can also pay 2, and if we do, we get to proliferate. The creature also itself has Toxic 3. Rib Skiff here helps us draw a card when it enters. We can crew it for 3 to make it into an artifact creature instead of just a vehicle, but it also has Toxic 2. And to finish off the game plan here, if we get all the way to 5 mana with a bunch of creatures out, we could swing, give all of our creatures +2/+2 until end of turn, and any creature that does get blocked, our opponent has to get a poison counter. Moving on to the creature spells that provide us still some general support, even if they don't have anything to do with Toxic, Poison, or Death Touch. We'll have Tyler's Provisioner here. Excellent card for green no matter what you play. This of course allows us to create food or treasure tokens to help us us with our game plan here. We can utilize Evolution Sage here. Same thing with the landfall ability. Anytime a land we control enters, proliferate. Once we at least get one poison counter on our opponent, this is an incredibly powerful card just simply by playing lands. Tangled Florahedron can be a land, or we could just simply use it as an elemental mana dork. And then additional mana dorks, of course, will be Land of War Elves and Elvish Mystic, with finally a Haywire Might here to help us exile a non-creature artifact or non-creature enchantment spell just to get rid of it permanently. To round out our whole game plan here, we'll have a bunch of spells that provide us pump, protection, and just general utility for the deck. So with the pump and protection, we'll utilize cards like Audacity here, giving one of our creatures +2/+0 and trample. If the aura is put into the graveyard, we simply draw a card. We'll have a bunch of protection with various cards that give us hexproof and indestructible, and sometimes extra pump like Blossoming Defense here. Defend the Rider, giving us protection when hexproof and indestructible, or we can make a pilot creature token. Not that we really need the pilot token, but sometimes it can be great to just make an instant chump blocker. Royal Treatment, same thing, more protection for us, and gives one of our creatures a royal token to give it +1/+1 and ward 1 for protection. Scala can be hilariously fun, especially on a creature that has trample, or we can overload it if we want to give all of our creatures 6/4 toughness and power to make it really hard for our opponent to block if we just want to finish out the game. Snakeskin Gale, +1/+1 counter on a creature, giving it hexproof as well. Tameo Safekeeping, probably the best one here. Doesn't really give us any pump, but it does give us a lot of good protection and life gain. Trash the Town here with the spree mechanic. You can mix and match what you need this card to do. Give it either a creature +1/+1 pump with 2 +1/+1 counters, give one of our creatures trample until end of turn, or if the creature deals combat damage, draw 2 cards. Basswood Fortification here, extra pump, or it can be a tap land. Wild Shape here, you can either make one of your creatures a 1/3 turtle with hexproof, 1/5 spider with reach, or a 3/3 elephant with trample. Ride the Shoot Path here and Roaring Earth provide us great value because these both have the landfall ability. Anytime a land enters, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature we control, which is great for us to make our creatures bigger. If you want instant pump, Blanchwood Armor is perfect for this deck here because it gives one of our creatures +1/+1 for each forest we control. Bridgework Battles here, technically it's a spot removal card, but we put it into the pump category because before it fights a creature, it gives one of our creatures +2/+2, or you can utilize it just simply as a land. And to round out our package here, Case of the Trampled Garden here, when it enters, put 2 +1/+1 counters among up to 2 target creatures we control. If we can solve the case by having a total control of power 8 or greater among all the creatures we control, anytime we attack, we get to pull another +1/+1 counter on a target attacking creature and trample until end of turn. As far as those general utility spells we'll start off with Bushwhack here. We can either dig out a basic land or use it as a fight spell for spot removal. Hard-Hitting Questions is also another great spot removal card for us. Sixth Sense is great for us to help us draw cards once this aura is attached to a creature and it deals combat damage. Thirsting Roots here also helps us dig out basic lands, or we can use it to proliferate our game plan. Soul Guy Lantern is going to be our graveyard hate against our opponents. Zephyr Boots here gives an equipped creature flying. Once we deal combat damage, just helps us just draw and discard cards. Druid class here allows us to, of course, gain some life every time we hit the landfall ability, and then we can just pump it up to give us more additional landfall triggers, or we can then turn it at level 3, giving one of our lands the ability to have power and toughness equal to the number of lands we control as a big creature. Atrox's Fall, great as spot removal for anything against artifacts, battles, enchantments, or creatures with flying. Heritage Reclamation does the same thing, except it does it at instant speed, and also be graveyard hate in a pinch. Hunter's Talent here, also going to be spot removal for us, and then once we pump it up, we can give one of our attacking creatures an extra +1/+0 pump, trample until end of turn, and at the final level, if we control a creature with power 4 or greater, we can just draw cards at the beginning of our end step. Kenner's Transformation here, in case we just have a hard time dealing with certain commanders or creatures we just can't remove, we can turn it into an elk and make it lose all abilities. Season of Growth is great for us to help fix our draws because every time a creature we control enters, we get to scry 1. If we do manage to then cast a spell that targets one of our creatures, we can just draw cards off of it. Nissa's Triumph here is just helping us with the ramp package. Swiftfoot Boots here gives one of our creatures protection with hexproof and haste. Bala Get Recovery allows us to recast one of our cards by digging it out of our graveyard back to our hand, or it could be a tap land. Cultivate here is going to be standard ops for us for just putting basics out into our hand and on the battlefield. Kalani's Ambush, you can use this as an instant speed spot removal, or it can be a tap land for us. Retreat to Kazandu here is a more expensive version of what the other cards do with the landfall ability, putting +1/+1 counters on a creature we control, or we could just simply gain life for stabilization. And to round out the package here for 4 mana, a card draw spell in Harmonize. But before we continue, if you do like any of the content that I do, please like, follow, and subscribe wherever you watch the content. You can support me monthly for a small amount on Patreon, where I have all of my extended bonus footage posted. We also have a Redbubble spot where you can buy merch like stickers and shirts, or for free, all you can just do also is just join our growing community on Discord. Your support helps keep this channel going. All links are in the details below. Now, as far as tips and strategies I can give you to get the value you want out of this deck, here's mostly what it comes down to. On turn 1, since we have a lot of 1-drop Death Touch creatures, try to get one of them in your hand and immediately put it out onto the board on that first turn. This way, assuming the coast is clear, once Fynn can come out on turn 2, you can immediately start swinging away and start putting a bunch of poison counters on your opponent. In a perfect world, you actually might be able to even close out the game as quickly as turn 3, because with the counters Fynn could put on there, it'll always be 2 as long as at least one Death Touch creature deals combat damage to an opponent. Obviously, you want to keep Fynn out as long as you possibly can. While the good part is he is a cheap commander to have, you don't want to have to recast him too many times, so as long as you can either use your protection spells or maybe use that Swiftfoot Boots to keep him alive, then you should have no problem closing out the game very quickly, again if your opponent does not have an answer. Try to minimize having this game go too long, but if it does go into the mid or late game, as you saw earlier, we do have quite a few options to help us keep drawing cards to make sure we don't run out of action and keep applying pressure to your opponent as you keep building up your board state. You have cards that allow you to go the distance with Season of Growth here, Rib Skiff, and even if the game goes very long where the board gets completely gummed up, Noxious Assault on the far end will also help you not only pump up your creatures, but also force your opponent to take poison counters when they don't want to with bad blocks. One of the biggest advantages our deck has is we are honestly an unstoppable strategy. What I mean by that is, once you start putting poison counters on your opponent, there's very few to almost no cards in any deck I have seen since I've even tested this deck that will stop our game plan. Realistically, there's maybe like 1-2 cards tops in Arena that can stop counters completely, but it's extremely rare in Brawl that you will ever run into those. So 99% of the time, once you get those poison counters on an opponent, they can't do anything. So we have a really clear advantage once we start putting more and more on our opponents. This leads us, of course, to the second major advantage our deck has is. And that second advantage, of course, is with the way we apply poison counters onto our opponent, our deck is not only hyper aggressive, but is very hard to deal with in combat. The majority of our cards have Death Touch built into them, and many of those cards are very low to the ground. So as long as your opponent has to keep doing bad blocks, even if you end up losing a couple of your 1-drops along the way, you're going to be trading up a lot against bigger creatures, allowing us either to be super aggressive or we can be very defensive, forcing our opponent to halt any kinds of combat advantage they may possibly have. And of course, the final major advantage our deck has is we of course are very, very low to the ground, and this of course is going to be a huge thing when it comes to opponents that try to play bigger spells. While your opponent has to play sometimes bigger spells to either blow away the whole board or spend more of their resources on counterspelling and spot removal, we have so many 1-drops and 2-drops that more often than not, we can sometimes just get ahead of our opponent by going wide with our game plan. But of course, it's not all sunshine and rainbows for us. We have to acknowledge if you do want to play this deck, what the major disadvantages you may be running into. And the first major disadvantage, of course, is you are going to be completely reliant on Fynn to stay on the battlefield as much as possible. Don't get me wrong, of course that's why we have in the deck cards that have Toxic to make sure we can keep putting poison counters on our opponent. But in order for us to get to victory a lot faster and more efficiently, you do need to make sure that Fynn stays on the battlefield as long as possible. And if opponents see, of course, once the game opens up, they know that you're going to have a commander that is shoot on sight, blow up ASAP, just get rid of him any way possible in order to prevent our game plan from going off. This leads us, of course, to the second major disadvantage our deck has, and that mostly is going to be we're very weak when it comes to endurance. Don't get me wrong, we do have endurance built into the deck as I mentioned earlier. You have cards like Harmonize and Season of Growth to help us, of course, keep drawing into more action and fixing our next draws. But those options are kind of weak even at a budget level, and it's going to be hard for you, of course, to go longer into the game. You want to try to close out this game as quick as possible so long as you can keep Fynn out and a couple of Death Touch creatures, that shouldn't be a problem. But if your opponent can endure that, more often than not, they can sometimes outvalue or eventually overwhelm your whole game plan. And this now leads us to the final major disadvantage our deck has. While we can deal with a lot of the spot removal because we have so many low to the ground creatures, we are completely vulnerable to wraths. If your opponent can keep blowing away the board, exiling a ton of stuff at once, this is where it's going to feel very sad for your deck. Don't get me wrong, you do have quite a few ways of getting around even that, but try not to get too greedy when it comes to putting down your Death Touch creatures. Not gonna lie, when testing this deck and playing it myself, while it was tempting to put out a lot of extra Death Touch creatures, sometimes that leads you into a false sense of security, and no matter what color it is, whether it's red, black, or white, or anything like that, those kinds of opponents will blow up your whole board and force you into an awkward state where you kind of have to rebuild, and this deck kind of has a little bit of a hard time rebuilding even though we are low to the ground. Now, if you did enjoy today's deck tech and you're interested in seeing what else you can do with mono green or poison in general, as always, I will show you on screen right now a couple of quick snapshots of previous decks we have done over the course of time on this channel and across various formats. If you haven't already noticed, those links have been scattered throughout the course of this video, so if you want to help me out and show a little bit of love, please make sure to click on one of those videos to see what else you can do with poison. And with that all out of the way, here are my final thoughts that I want to give you on this deck. When it comes to mono green commander, or at least in this case Brawl, definitely Fynn The Fangbearer stands alone at the top of the mountain because he is probably one of the strongest and overall best budget options you can actually play in mono green. So, to put this another way, if you're a fan of the Death Touch mechanic, if you're a fan of mono green aggro, and if you're a fan of alternate win cons by utilizing Fynn or the Toxic mechanic to then just beat down your opponent with a bunch of counters, then I would definitely say, give this deck a try. And I assure you, when you manage to poison your opponent with that magic number of 10 poison counters, you're going to have a lot of fun doing so, and you'll be very surprised at how you can pull it off on today's budget. And I assure you, you will definitely not be disappointed. That's all I have for you today. Thanks again for watching, everyone. And just remember that no matter what you do play in the game of life, always be sure to burn bright. Later.